All right, so this is a interview by General Clark about the Iraq invasion. I want you guys to open your ears and listen carefully to what he's saying here. We're going to try and break down everything he's saying, but seriously, listen to what he's saying right here.
Called in by an officer on the Joint Staff who told me that he said, we're going to invade Iraq. I said, but why? He said, I guess because we don't know what else to do.
This man, you know who this man was? He was the commander-in-chief of NATO, right? Listen to what he said again.
I don't know. He said, I guess because we don't know what else to do.
They invaded Iraq because they didn't know what else to do. He also says about the weapons of mass destruction that they basically knew that Iraq doesn't have them. He also tells about the fact that Iraq and Al-Qaeda had nothing to do with each other. So basically the whole towers thing was a CB fabrication right there. So they can just attack the country. Listen to the whole thing and I'll give you my theory after what I think is behind all of this.
And in 1991, when I talked to Secretary Wolfowitz, he said, we didn't get rid of Saddam Hussein, and we should have. He said, we've only got 5 or 10 years to clean up the Middle East.
Do you know what he's talking about there? We only have 5 to 10 years to clean up the Middle East. So the US's prediction of the future back in the 90s was that after the fall of the USSR, a new world power is going to emerge. They don't specify who it is. They likely thought that it would be China or someone of the sorts, maybe European Union as a centralized country, you never know. Whatever the case, they did specify that after 10 to 15 years, waging war left and right like that without anyone opposing them would be impossible. And they're kind of right about that.
These old Soviet surrogate regimes like Syria and Iraq, get rid of them before the next superpower comes along to challenge.
There you go, before the next superpower comes along.
Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda couldn't have been further apart.
Exactly. Saddam hated Al-Qaeda, in case you guys don't know. You know who was one of the biggest friends of Al-Qaeda? Bush. Bush knew Osama bin Laden. Al-Qaeda was really good friends with Qatar, by the way. One of the biggest allies of the United States at the time. And Al-Qaeda had one of its headquarters in Qatar at the time. Just saying.
There was no single reason. There was some weapons of mass destruction possibly that were still there, but we'd had 10 years for the UN Special Commission.
See, he says in 10 years they didn't find any weapons of mass destruction. And realistically speaking, if they had nuclear missiles, do you actually fucking think they would have invaded Iraq? Why do you think they're not invading North Korea? Literally the only thing keeping them from invading North Korea is nuclearly armed North Korea and China. That's it. If China and North Korea did not have nukes, they would invade North Korea by now. If Russia didn't have nukes, they would help Ukraine by now. They knew that Iraq doesn't have nukes. They knew that Iraq had no connections to Al-Qaeda. It was literally a war of aggression. This is the guy in charge. When they did the attack, even he was shocked.
Maybe there was some unaccounted for scuds that they said had been fired in training. Maybe yes, maybe no. But there wasn't much that I knew of.
He was the guy in charge, by the way, guys.
And I thought back to the conversation with Wolfowitz, and I thought what I'd been told inside the Pentagon, and I began to smell something that didn't smell right. So here's what I think actually happened. So essentially what was happening in the 70s, 80s, and 90s is the US was getting basically a monopoly in the Middle East here over Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait. These 5 nations here, these are basically great allies of the United States, Israel as well, of course. These are really good allies of the United States, all of these nations here. They were getting their oil via the south part here. They were transferring the oil probably through the Suez and going to the US, right? They're getting most of the Saudi oil, Qatar oil is sold to the United States, in case you guys don't know. Now, what they were proposing is to make a pipeline through Iraq, through Syria. This way it's going to be a lot faster, just directly pumping into here and then bringing it over and shipping it to Europe and whatever else they want to ship it to. Now, that wouldn't have been possible with Iraq being controlled by Saddam, Syria by whatever the hell that guy's name is, and so on. Iraq is now basically a puppet of the US, let's face it. So they can do that plan now. So they can do their pipeline through Iraq, Turkey, and into Europe and sell all that juicy slave oil from Qatar to European nations now. Maybe that's what really happened. Just saying. Makes a lot more sense than weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, boyos. Does it sound really whatchamacallit? Like crazy? Maybe a little bit. But I still think that a little bit of truth in this, maybe there is. He served as the Supreme Allied Commander Europe of NATO between 1997 and 2000. This was before the invasion of Iraq, obviously. But he was still a part of the military back then when the invasion happened and so on. And he even says that he was basically in touch with all the intel elements and so on. And also during Operation Allied Force and so on. The man knows what he's saying, He's not just some fucking cuckoo coming on fucking TV and going, yeah, I'm just making this shit up. He's not. Russian Federation is invading Ukraine for oil and H2O. I wouldn't say that's not true, T-Rex. I actually do think that you have some valid points there. I do also think that the Russians likely are invading the Ukrainians because of the oil in Crimea and the gas and the one in Donbass. Like, these areas have a lot of coal, oil, and all that shit that I'm sure the Russians would love to get their hands on, right? It's all about economics. It's all about economic warfare. That's why the Americans invaded in the Middle East. That's why the Russians invading Ukraine. And the bottom line is that it's not okay for the Russians to invade Ukraine. It's not okay for the Americans to invade whoever the fuck they want to invade. These countries are sovereign countries. We should respect their sovereignty. Whether we agree with how they became countries or not, like Putin fucking going on saying, oh, it's an invented state. Well, fucking Russia's an invented state also. All fucking countries are invented. How do you invent a country? Well, you invent the fucking country when you decide as an ethnic group usually, or as any sort of group, when you decide as a collective that you want to make that fucking country. George Soros, huge multimillionaire, he invested a lot of money into governments in Central Europe. He's born in Budapest and he's 90 fucking years old. What the fuck, dude? He's got a 36-year-old son. Let me put this into perspective. This guy had a kid at 65 years old of age. This woman is married to someone that is 40 years older than her. Must be real love, guys. Must be real love. I mean, what else can it be, guys? It cannot be anything else, right? Has to be real love. We call them prospectors. She's probably invested a lot. And she probably was not expecting this guy to live to 91. George Soros is a lizard person, just like Mark Zuckerberg. To a prosperous, non-observant Jewish family. What does non-observant mean? Oh, they don't practice. Okay, right. Okay, so he's Jewish, but he doesn't practice. Okay. Upper middle class Hungarian Jews at the time, comfortable with their roots. Soros described his home as Jewish anti-Semitic home. He's a Jew, and his family was Jewish anti-Semitic. What? So Semitic people are Arabs, Jews, Ethiopians, and yeah, these people here. And they hate them? They hate their own people? Surely that's not possible. Let's look at Israel. Israel is one of the most civilized and enlightened countries in the world. They accept everybody equally. Can you imagine what it would be like if they started like building walls to separate communities and taking people's homes by force? That would be unimaginable, right, chat? Soros moved to England, became a student at London School of Economics, worked as a railway porter, as a waiter, only received £40 from a Quaker charity, would sometimes stand at speaker's corner lecturing about the virtues of internationalism and Esperanto, which he had learned from his father. Guys, which one of his employees do you think edited his Wikipedia page? Let's look at this for a second, right? He was born in an upper middle class Jewish family, not lower middle class, upper middle class. He had the money to travel to England and become a student at the London School of Economics. Not everyone could have done that at the time. It tells us how he was a porter and a waiter. Look at the poor backgrounds he's got. Look at how horrible his life was. But you know what? Here's the American dream, because he made it. Look how much money this waiter has, guys. Anyone can do it. Just listen to the narrative, everybody. Are you not convinced? Let me wash your brain a little bit more. Oh. Doesn't matter what you believe in. Doesn't matter what your creed is. Doesn't matter what your skin color is. What matters is that we all hate the person that the countries tell us to hate, okay? Just follow the narrative. Be a sheep. Definitely don't think for yourself. What I'm trying to say here is we need to fight against the institution. Fight the man. Doesn't matter where you're from. Remember, hate the Ottomans, kill them early game. This is true. Bible 101 of EU4 players. Doesn't matter where you're from. 11th of December, 1444. No CB Byzantium. True.